Hey guys, tonight we descend into the frost-bitten shadows of medieval Russia. The year? Somewhere in the 1300s. The air is razor sharp. Your boots are soaked through. The fire crackles weakly, casting long flickering shadows on the snow. Somewhere behind you, a howl. Somewhere closer, a whisper. Not all secrets survive the night out here, and neither do all men. If this atmospheric history helps you slow down and drift off, go ahead and like and subscribe. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Drop your local time and where you're listening from in the comments. It's always so cozy to see where everyone's curled up around the world. Now, lean back, pull that blanket a little tighter, and let's wander into the coldest centuries of Russia, one frost-bitten footstep at a time. The first thing that hits you isn't the silence, it's the cold. A slap, a bite, a full-body chokehold. You're not walking through snow, you're wading. Waist deep in powder, each step a drag against the frozen weight of the world. Your eyelashes crunch with frost. Your nose has stopped existing. And your fingers? Let's not talk about them. Not everyone makes it through the season with 10. Life in medieval Russia doesn't wait for spring. The year claws at you in cycles. Freezing, thawing, planting, starving, and if you're lucky, maybe surviving. You're not in a bustling European city with stone streets and candlelit taverns. No, here you're in a scattered village of crooked wood huts and smoky chimneys where wolves are more common than guests and roofs sag under snow like old men under debt. And speaking of roofs, yours leaks. Not always, but when the thaw hits and the snow finally weeps its way into spring, your ceiling becomes a sponge. The smoke hole in the center of the hut coughs out more heat than it keeps in. Your bed is straw, and your blanket is the same coarse wool that makes your tunic scratch your skin all day. You don't complain. Complaining implies someone's listening. Now, try cooking. Your firewood's damp, your soup is mostly water, and your bread has more dirt than flour. But it's not the taste that gets to you. It's the silence. No humming, no idle talk, just the heavy sound of survival. Your neighbors don't chat unless it's urgent, or scandalous, or both. Outside, frost flowers bloom on every surface. Windows, doors, your own mustache. The only warmth comes from livestock crammed indoors with you to share body heat and fleas. That cow. She's family now. That goat? Don't make her angry. And don't even look at the chickens the wrong way. They bite. You'd think this might all toughen you up, and it does. But it also breaks people down in quiet, invisible ways. You start counting not years, but winters survived. Historians still argue whether this brutal climate hardened the Russian character or simply winnowed the population down to only the hardiest or the luckiest. Maybe both. Want a quirky fact? There were entire folk customs built around keeping the cold spirits at bay. One involved dragging an effigy of winter into the woods and burning it, not just for warmth, but to symbolically kill the season. You don't mess with metaphor when your life depends on it. At night, the cold deepens. You sleep wrapped in layers, curled tight, face tucked into your arms. You dream of warmth, like it's a lover you barely remember. And if someone snores too loud, you throw a boot. If someone dies in their sleep, you bury them fast. The ground might thaw soon, and you can't wait. You don't own a clock. Time is the crack of ice, the slow drip from the eaves, the way your joints ache when it's about to snow. Morning means the rooster screams. Evening means someone's stomach does. And what about news? Well, gossip travels faster than horses. There's a story about a merchant frozen mid-stride, upright like a statue with his purse still clutched in hand. Or the hunter who lit a fire so hot it burned down half the woods, only to die of cold anyway. You tell these stories in low voices, close to the hearth, as your shadow dances along the wall like it's trying to leave without you. There's humor here, sure, but it's bitter and dry like the bread crusts saved for last. Someone jokes that if you survive until spring, you get to start suffering in a different way. Someone else laughs, but it sounds more like a cough. And just when you think the cold is the worst of it, comes the reminder that winter doesn't stop the dangers. Bandits don't freeze. They just get sneakier. Wolves grow hungrier. And soldiers, they still march, still take, still burn. Snow covers a lot of sins. You trudge on, past frostbitten trees and smoke pillars rising from chimneys that lean like they're drunk. Somewhere, a bell rings. Not for prayer. Not today. It rings because someone died. Again. You stop to warm your hands by a small fire outside a hut. The old man beside you doesn't speak, just spits into the snow. The hiss of it is the loudest thing you've heard in hours. So, welcome to medieval Russia. Hope you brought thick socks. You hear the horses before you see them. Heavy hooves crunching over snow, breath huffing in angry clouds, and leather creaking like an old tree about to snap. Then come the men. Tall, grim, wrapped in fur and steel, faces hidden under helmets that reflect no warmth. They don't speak unless it's to bark an order. These are the Tsar's men. And when they arrive, you freeze for more reasons than the weather. You're not in Moscow. You're far from the gilded halls or stone towers. But the Tsar's shadow is long. Longer than rivers, deeper than forests, and darker than the moonless nights you try not to think about. His word is law. His silence, often worse. You don't know if he knows your name, but you know this. If he ever says it out loud, something very bad is about to happen. The Tsar in this period, take Ivan IV, for example, the one they'd later call the Terrible, isn't just a ruler. He's myth, monster, and man all tangled into one. One day he's building churches. The next, he's ordering mass executions in Novgorod. Historians still argue whether he was a genius tactician suffering from paranoia, or a paranoid madman who occasionally had genius ideas. Sometimes the difference was only who got beheaded afterward. When the Tsar decides someone's dangerous, he doesn't send a polite letter. He sends the oprichniki, men in black robes who rode black horses and carried dog heads and broomsticks as their badges. Why? The dog's head symbolized sniffing out treason. The broom? Sweeping away enemies? Charming. You might see them ride through your village, not stopping, not smiling. But don't relax. Sometimes they came back, and when they did, it wasn't for tea. Back at your hearth, you try to live small. You speak in half sentences. You don't brag, don't boast, and never joke about the Tsar, not even in a whisper. Someone's always listening. Maybe the neighbor's kid, maybe the priest, maybe your own spouse, tired of hiding your taxes. You watch as a friend, a quiet man who never caused trouble, is taken in the night. No explanation, no trial. Just silence and the sound of hooves on ice. His hut sits empty the next morning. Fire still warm. His goat bleats once, he then falls quiet forever. What's scary isn't that the state is brutal. It's that it's unpredictable. One year, the Tsar sends grain to starving villages. The next, he lets them rot. One week, you're honored with a visit from a minor noble. The next, he's burning your barn for suspected disloyalty. The line between favor and doom? Razor thin, and always shifting. Want something weird? There were rumors Ivan had a mercury room, a chamber laced with mercury vapors where he'd sit to cleanse himself. Sounds mystical, sure. Also sounds like he was slowly poisoning his brain. Might explain the part where he killed his own son during a fit of rage. Again, historians are still yelling at each other about whether that was an accident, a breakdown, or a dark moment of clarity. Either way, you don't talk about it. You hear stories, though. Stories that flicker like firelight, of noblemen executed for looking bored at court, of entire towns punished because someone mocked the wrong proverb, of whispers that the Tsar wandered the corridors of his palace in disguise, eavesdropping. Maybe true, maybe not, but you don't take chances. You write nothing down. You remember only what's safe, and even then only when it's dark and you're sure the wind is louder than your voice. The law exists, sure, but it's not about justice. It's about order, loyalty, control. You can appeal, but to whom? The Boyars are just as ruthless. The courts are slow, corrupt, and terrifying. Sometimes justice is just a matter of having the right friend or bribing the right priest. And if you're thinking, well, at least I'm nobody important, remember, that's what they thought too. You duck under the weight of this power daily. It presses down on your hut, on your thoughts, even your dreams. You start dreaming of the Tsar, not with a face, but as a voice, booming in judgment or cooing in false kindness. Even your sleep isn't yours. But the fear? It binds people together in strange ways. You look out for each other. You share your meager stew. You cover for your neighbor's missing son. You patch roofs together. Not because it's safe, because it's the only way to feel human again. One cold evening, you watch a procession of soldiers move through the village. No raids, no arrests. This time, a child tugs on your sleeve and asks, "Are they the Tsars?" You nod slowly, then whisper, "They're everyone's." And just like that, the fire crackles a little louder, and everyone stops talking. You're bent over, elbow deep in mud, trying to coax something edible out of a piece of land that's more stubborn than a mule and twice as cruel. This is peasant life in medieval Russia, where your days are long, your nights are short, and your hope, well, it's a luxury you can't afford most seasons. Your hands are raw, your nails cracked. The wind whistles through the gaps in your sleeves because fabric is expensive and patching takes time you don't have. You don't farm because you want to. You farm because if you don't, you die. Or worse, someone else dies because you didn't work hard enough. You are a serf, not a slave, technically. You're tied to the land, which sounds poetic until you realize it means your children, their children, and their children's children will all be born under the same sky, in the same dirt, for the same master. You can't leave. Not legally. Not without permission, which you will never get unless your lords had too much kvass and a spiritual epiphany. Which he won't. The Lord? You see him once or twice a year, maybe. He arrives with silk gloves, fat horses, and clean boots, the kind that have never touched dung in their lives. He speaks through someone else, looks through you. You bow because that's what your father did, and his father, and so on, all the way back to when bows were basically survival instincts. You live in a one-room hut. If you're lucky, it's yours. If you're not, you're crammed in with extended family, livestock, and whatever ghost's history left behind. The air inside smells like smoke, sweat, and sour cabbage. You don't notice it anymore. You just hope the lice don't bite tonight. The tax collector arrives in spring, always spring. Just when you think maybe the worst is over, he rides in with an oily smile and too many guards. He doesn't care that last year's crop failed, or that your son's been coughing blood. He wants the quota. You give him coins, or grain, or sometimes a chicken. Sometimes you give him silence, the only thing left in your pockets. Want a quirky tidbit? In some villages, peasants made protective dolls out of old cloth scraps. They weren't for kids. They were talismans. One doll for the hearth, one for the barn, one for the fields. No faces, because it was believed a doll with a face might see too much and bring bad luck. So now you know, even your stuffed rags are part of the anxiety. You try to laugh. Someone tells a joke about a chicken marrying a pig, and everyone chuckles. Not because it's funny, but because it's the only joke anyone remembers. Laughter here isn't joy, it's resistance. Your meals? Porridge. Every single day. If you're fancy, it's oat porridge. If you're poor, and you are, it's probably millet or barley. You chew slowly, trying not to taste it. On feast days, you might get beets. On holy days, maybe some fish. Meat is a rumor unless it's your own goat. And if you're eating your own goat, something's gone very wrong. What's school like? It's not. You can't read, and you probably never will. The priest might, but he guards that knowledge like gold. You memorize everything instead. Songs, stories, prayers, warnings. Your whole education is oral, which is poetic until you realize how much knowledge slips through the cracks when it's passed down like gossip. There's no privacy. Not in the hut, not in the village. If you cry, someone hears. If you shout at your spouse, 10 people know by dusk. If your daughter starts showing signs of beauty, older women start whispering prayers to keep the wrong eyes away. Historians still argue whether the Russian peasantry lived with a quiet resilience or a simmering, inherited rage. But when you live a life like this, the truth is probably both. You survive because you have to, and also because, deep down, you refuse to give your suffering the satisfaction of winning. Evenings are short, but sacred. You sit near the hearth. You don't have a chair, so you use a stump or fold your legs. Someone hums an old lullaby about a girl who fell in love with a bear. Everyone knows the tune. No one remembers where it came from. Maybe that's for the best. The cold creeps in early. You patch the roof again. You tie the chickens in tighter. You curl up with your siblings, 2 goats, and a bucket of turnips, and hope no one rolls over onto your face in the night. You wake up sore, always. But even here, even in this mud and struggle, there's a rhythm, a kind of aching beauty. You see it in the frost patterns on the window, in the way your mother braids your sister's hair before dawn, in the moment when a neighbor shares half a crust of bread just because you look tired. This life is brutal, but it is also deeply, stubbornly human. No. You feel it in the roads, not paved, not smooth, just endless tracks of churned up earth, deep ruts and frozen puddles that shatter under your boots. Every step is history layered beneath your feet. And it isn't just your history. It's the ghost of an empire that never quite left. The Mongols. No, they're not here now. Not exactly. But their shadow stretches wide. Even a century after the yoke officially broke, you can still hear their thunder if you close your eyes. Hooves pounding like war drums, arrows raining like cold rain, the screams, the fire, the way the air turned red when they came. They were known as the Golden Horde, and for nearly 250 years, they ruled over Rus like a storm held in a cage. You weren't alive then, but your grandmother was. Or maybe her grandmother. Doesn't matter. You still live in the aftermath. Every village remembers the names: Batu Khan, Subedai, the Kanei of Kazan, and though they have long been pushed east, their weight still presses on the people like a bruise that never healed. You walk past a crumbling watchtower. It leans like a drunk, half swallowed by trees. That was Mongol-built. Someone mutters beside you, but you both know it wasn't. Still, the fear lingers. Memory in these lands isn't always accurate, but it's stubborn. Taxes? You think they're bad now? The Mongols invented the system of tribute that still squeezes you like a lemon. Back then, the princes of Rus paid gold, grain, even children to the Khans to avoid slaughter. Today, you pay your local prince or czar. But the game hasn't changed much. Different hats, same hunger. Want a strange tidbit? The Mongols introduced a postal relay system across their empire, including Russia. Fast horses, fresh messengers, and way stations every few miles. Efficient, terrifying. Some historians believe the Russian state learned more than how to fear from the horde. They learned how to rule, and that's the part you feel now. Because when the Mongols eventually retreated, they didn't take their blueprint with them. The princes who survived, especially the ones from Moscow, copied it. They built centralized power, demanded obedience. They learned how to collect taxes with force, how to turn neighbors into spies, how to survive by making sure others didn't. The Mongols didn't just conquer Russia, they rewired its DNA. That's why you flinch when someone knocks at the door. Why you whisper when talking politics. Why you bow deeper than you need to. Not because the Khan is coming, but because in some ways, he never really left. Historians still debate how much of modern Russian governance traces back to Mongol methods versus native tradition. Some say Muscovite rulers simply adapted what already existed. Others argue the horde's domination imprinted a permanent structure of centralized control and submission. Either way, when you watch a soldier drag a man off a cart for underpaying his tithe, you don't need a historian to tell you something ancient is at work. You take shelter in a roadside chapel, small, smoky, covered in icons. You cross yourself automatically. Above the altar is St. George slaying a dragon. You wonder, not for the first time, if the dragon's supposed to be Mongol. No one will say so. But the art sometimes tells stories no one dares write down. Outside, you see the road fork. One path leads to a crumbled fort, once a Mongol outpost. The other heads to Moscow. You go toward Moscow, not because it's safe, but because at least it's Russian. You hope. And that's the thing. The horde didn't just take your ancestors' freedom. They took their certainty. Now, even when the enemy's gone, you don't trust that they're really gone. You hear hoofbeats and thunder. You see Tatar helmets in the shine of your cooking pot. You teach your children not to look strangers in the eye. But in spite of it, or maybe because of it, you're still here, still walking, still planting, still waking up before dawn to milk a cow that kicks and never says thank you. There's strength in that, a kind of quiet, stubborn resistance. You pass a farmer carving protective runes into the wood frame of his barn. He doesn't know what they mean. His grandfather did, but he carves them anyway, just in case. The Mongol yoke is broken, they say. But you know better. Some weights don't lift. They settle, deep. And when the wind blows from the east, you swear you can still hear hoofbeats. Night falls early, like a curtain yanked closed by unseen hands. The sun doesn't set so much as vanish, swallowed whole by the endless forest. You light a little oil lamp, just enough to see the floor and the expressions on the faces around you. But even then, You're not sure what you're really looking at, because tonight feels different. Something's out there. A low howl rolls over the treetops. Not close, but not far either. Wolves again, or something worse. You don't know. You don't want to know. You just pull your sheepskin tighter, shift closer to the hearth, and glance toward the door. It's bolted. Of course it's bolted. But your eyes flick to it anyway. Outside, shadows move strangely. The wind picks up. You hear what sounds like twigs snapping. Maybe just the cold playing tricks. Or maybe not. You know what the stories say. In medieval Russia, fear isn't just a feeling. It's a language. And you speak it fluently. Wolves are real and brutal. Packs sometimes circle villages. In hard winters, they get desperate. They take chickens, dogs, sometimes children. You hear of travelers found picked clean, bones left like firewood. But wolves don't scare you the most. People do, especially the ones who look too closely, who know things, who whisper strange words into their bread before they eat. The village watchmen aren't soldiers. They're not even that brave. They carry dull spears, wear boiled leather armor if they're lucky, and pace through the dark muttering half-finished prayers. They know they're not really here to stop danger, just to notice it before it's too late. Someone knocks. You freeze. Everyone does. Knocking after dark? That's not done. Not unless it's an emergency, or a warning, or something worse pretending to be either. You wait. No second knock. Someone exhales, a slow trembling breath, and the room relaxes by an inch. This is how fear works here. Slow, creeping, intimate. It curls around your ankles and climbs your spine. It makes you notice things you shouldn't, like how old Widow Varya's door has fresh scratches, even though she says she hasn't left the house all week. Or how little Alexei started speaking fluent prayers overnight, ones the priest says aren't in any book he's ever read. There are always whispers about witches in the woods, about men who turn into bears, about women who can curse your livestock just by looking bored. Sometimes you join the whispers. Sometimes you're the one they're whispering about. Want a quirky detail? In some rural communities, people believed that if you left your broom outside upside down, it would trap wandering spirits. If the broom was missing in the morning, well, better to pretend you never had one. The church tries to keep a lid on all this, of course. They preach, they warn, they ban charms and pagan nonsense. But even the priests flinch when the dogs start howling at nothing. Even they sleep with iron under their pillows. Historians still debate how much of Russian folk fear was pre-Christian belief versus medieval hysteria. Some say it's all leftover paganism, fermented into superstition. Others argue it's the natural result of living in a land where every winter could kill you and every stranger might carry plague. Either way, it's part of the air now. You breathe it in. Tonight, someone's goat gave birth to a stillborn kid, and everyone's a little too interested in what shape its ears were. A baby down the lane won't stop crying, and its mother hasn't spoken all day. The priest says it's just colic. The old women say otherwise. You try not to pick a side. Earlier this year, a girl named Danica was accused of freezing her neighbor's cow with a glance. No one saw her do anything. No one had proof. But the cow died. And Danica had eyes that didn't blink enough. That was all it took. They shaved her head, dragged her into the woods, made her walk the edge of the frozen river 3 times backward. When nothing happened, nothing obvious anyway, they let her go. But she doesn't talk now. She just sits by the fire and stares. And even though you know it's wrong, you don't sit near her anymore. You get up, poke at the fire, and glance at the window. There's a face in it, for just a second. a flash, a trick of light. Maybe you don't say anything. Instead, you grab the charm your grandmother gave you, a twisted little bundle of thread and dried root, and place it near the door. You don't believe in that kind of thing. Not really. But you do it anyway. Because belief isn't always about faith. Sometimes it's about insurance. And in medieval Russia, night is expensive. You step inside the village church, and it's like stepping into another world. Warm, dim, golden. Not warm from heat, though. There's barely any of that. It's warm from candlelight and incense, from breath held in reverence, and from fear that smells faintly like beeswax and centuries-old dust. The wood creaks under your boots, each step a small confession. Cold air clings to your coat, reluctant to leave even here. And above all else, the silence. Not emptiness, but compression, like the weight of history is pressing against the walls, bowing them inward. This isn't sanctuary. This is surveillance wrapped in iconography. The walls are covered in saints, painted in ochre and faded gold, their eyes enormous and sorrowful, watching not just your body, but your soul. There's something judgmental in their gaze, not malicious, just tired, like they've seen everything and have run out of surprises. They don't smile. No one here smiles unless they're hiding something. You don't meet the saint's gaze. You lower your head. Always. Religion isn't a comfort here. It's a rule book with sharp corners. It's an agreement you never signed but have to follow. Or else. You kneel, not because you want to, but because everyone else does. The timing matters. The posture matters. You cross yourself 3 times, left to right. Carefully, slowly, like carving invisible runes across your chest. Someone once crossed the wrong way and lost their land. Or maybe just their reputation. Or maybe just their mind. You don't remember the exact story, but you remember it was bad. The priest begins to speak, not loudly, but with a tone that bends the air. His voice rises in a low drone, like bees wrapped in wool. There's rhythm in it, but no melody. It isn't for your understanding. It's for your obedience. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. His power isn't loud. It's quiet, relentless, and written in ink thicker than your blood. He knows everyone. Who's married? Who's pregnant? Who's fighting? Who skipped last Sunday? Who showed up at dawn and stayed after the candles burned low? He knows who drinks too much and who disappears into the woods too often, and he knows who leaves little bits of bread on the windowsill for the old gods, even if he pretends he doesn't. You light a candle, not for someone specific, just in case. In case the saints are watching. In case your grandmother was right. In case that nightmare from last week wasn't just a nightmare. The wax strips slowly. Time bends around it. Want something weird? Some Russian Orthodox churches held services lasting up to 6 hours, standing only. No pews, no cushions, no breaks. If your knees gave out, you leaned against a wall and hoped no one judged you too harshly. It was said that the discomfort helped purify the soul, but mostly it just hurt. You shift your weight from foot to foot, trying not to think about your aching knees. But the service isn't just prayer. It's performance, punishment, purification. You squint at a mural showing sinners in hell. Boiling, burning, begging. The artist was enthusiastic, maybe a little too enthusiastic. Some devils even have names scrawled under them. Names no one speaks aloud anymore. You wonder if the artist was trying to scare people into behaving, or just had a lot of unresolved feelings. One saint is stabbing a serpent. Another stands with his hands lifted as flames lick at his robes. Behind them, the eyes again. Dozens, all watching, none blinking. You feel naked, even though you're wrapped in wool. Historians still argue whether the church's dominance over daily life was more spiritual or political. Was it faith that kept people coming every Sunday? Or fear of social death? Either way, you're here. And not because your soul felt called. After the service, no one rushes to leave. There's no applause, no chatting. Just people backing out, slowly, respectfully, like they're exiting the court of a very moody king. The priest lingers by the door, nodding to each person. You lower your eyes as you pass, but you feel his look like a hook in your shoulder. It's not personal. He looks at everyone like that, like he's taking inventory, like he's wondering which of you might need reminding that God is watching. Outside, the air hits you like a slap. The incense was masking the cold. Now it settles in your bones again, a reminder that holiness doesn't change the weather. People drift off in small clusters. No one talks about the sermon. They talk about a calf born with a white eye, about someone's dream last night where the moon bled, about the merchant who passed through town 2 weeks ago and might have had the pox, but not about the sermon. Never. You take the long way home, past the old graveyard. It's mostly wooden crosses, half rotted. The names have faded. The ground is uneven. You step carefully, not out of respect, but because sometimes graves shift when it rains, and no one wants to fall into history that literally. There's a shrine near the edge of the cemetery, a little roofed box with a saint's icon inside, and a pile of small offerings, coins, buttons, even a dried apple. You add something too. It doesn't matter what. The act is what counts. You bow your head, not all the way, just enough. At home, you try to pray again, privately this time. Not the official words, but the ones you actually believe, or want to believe. You don't ask for much, just safety, maybe warmth, maybe for your brother's cough to go away, maybe for the priest to forget what he saw in your eyes today. Your grandmother used to say, "The church is the fire, but don't forget who lights it." You didn't understand that when you were a child. You do now. Because in medieval Russia, the church isn't a building, it's a temperature. Sometimes it keeps you warm, sometimes it burns, and either way, you stand very, very still. It starts with laughter, but not the happy kind. The awkward, high-pitched kind that bubbles up in a cold room full of relatives who don't really like each other, trying to act like they do. You're at a wedding, and yes, congratulations are in order. Sort of. The bride is young. Too young, maybe? 14, if that. Her smile is thin, not forced, just fragile, like frost on glass. Her hands stay folded in her lap, wrists pressed together as if to hold something in. The groom is older, sturdy-looking, with a beard that hides most of his face and shoulders, broad enough to block the doorway. You don't know if they've spoken more than 10 words to each other. You hope they have. But honestly, probably not. Marriages here aren't about love. They're about survival. Property, social status, political alliances. Even in a poor village, a wedding is more negotiation than romance. Two families coming together, not because of butterflies or long walks by the river, but because one has a spare cow and the other has 3 daughters to marry off before winter closes in like a fist. You sit near the edge of the izba, clutching a clay cup filled with something that burns a little too much to be festive. Samogon, probably. Homemade, sharp, unfiltered. There's food, boiled, bland, and plentiful by peasant standards. Black bread, pickled mushrooms, dried fish wrapped in cabbage leaves. A soup you can't quite identify that smells like onion and tired water. A few coarse cakes of rye and lard that stick in the throat like guilt. The room is loud but joyless. Music, chatter, forced claps. The kind of celebration that masks obligation. The bride keeps her head down. Her dress is simple but spotless. Hand-stitched linen, embroidered along the hems and sleeves with tiny red patterns to ward off the evil eye. One sleeve hangs too long. The seamstress must have been rushed. She wears a wreath of dried flowers, already wilting under the weight of the room. You can't tell if her silence is shyness or strategy. In this place, silence is a shield. Now for a strange detail. In some parts of medieval Russia, the bride's hair was braided one final time by her mother just before the ceremony, in total silence. It was symbolic, the last gesture of girlhood. After the wedding, her braid would be unbraided by her husband, often in public. Yes, public. It wasn't just ritual. It was a kind of unveiling, a transfer, a quiet, choreographed erasure of childhood. The groom looks proud, not of the marriage, but of himself, like he won a prize. His posture is sharp, his eyes territorial. He hasn't looked at the bride once since the ceremony began, but he's already got a hand on her elbow, like she's a belt he intends to tighten later. A matchmaker arranged all this, of course. Always someone older, with a memory full of secrets and a voice full of bargains. They knew who had debt, who had land, who had unspoken feuds. Love wasn't consulted. Compatibility wasn't measured in shared jokes or matching dreams. It was about borders, boundaries, and whether your families hated the same people. Historians still argue whether medieval Russian women had any agency in marriage. Some say village girls quietly steered the process, dropping hints, nudging outcomes. Others insist it was entirely patriarchal, a closed-door contract written in cattle and sealed in vodka. Judging by the bride's blank expression, you're not sure which version feels worse. The ceremony was religious, solemn, and strange. Prayers hummed like fog. Incense rose from cracked censers. At one point, the couple walked in a circle 3 times, bound by a scarf. It was meant to symbolize unity. It looked more like choreography for a tethered life. The priest didn't smile. He didn't bless love. He blessed obedience. And then came the feast. You try to enjoy it. People drink, heavily. A boy stands on a stool and sings something off-key. Someone plays the gusli, a trembling, stringed sound, like a spider plucking sorrow out of wood. There's dancing, but it's the kind that bruises feet and elbows. An uncle waves a pitchfork in the air like it's a banner. 2 cousins get into a wrestling match over who stole someone's bread crust. The mood lifts for a moment, but only a moment, because everyone knows what comes next. After the feast, there's the witnessing. Not always literal, not anymore, but the echoes of it remain. The bride is led to a separate chamber. The groom follows. People cheer. A few make ribald jokes. The old women whisper superstitions. You stay seated. You don't want to hear what happens behind the curtain. You definitely don't want to see. Later, someone produces a sheet. There's a stain. Maybe real. Maybe planted. Maybe wine. It doesn't matter. The ritual requires a result. There's clapping, singing, crying. It's not about love. It's about proof. Proof that the bride was pure. Proof that the marriage is sealed. Proof that something irreversible has happened. You slip out into the night. The stars above look indifferent. The frost bites. Somewhere down the lane, someone vomits behind a haycart. Farther off, someone sings a wedding song older than any memory. 2 birds build a nest, 1 twig at a time. The melody is tender, achingly so. It doesn't fit. and maybe that's why it hurts. You walk home slowly, thinking about how love fits into all this. Does it? Can it? You remember an old couple in the village. Stooped, leathery, half deaf from years of wind and silence. They never held hands, never kissed, never told stories. But once, years ago, you saw the man pause mid-walk, tuck the woman's scarf tighter around her shoulders as the wind picked up. She didn't thank him. She just smiled. Maybe that's what love looks like here. Not a spark, not a poem, but a gesture. A coal. Dim, persistent, alive in the dark. Not enough to warm a room, but maybe enough to get through one more winter. And maybe, just maybe, that's all anyone here has ever hoped for. Your stomach growls again. Not the polite little whisper it gives when you skip a meal. This is the deep, echoing rumble of a body begging for calories. You've been hungry before, sure. But this is different. This is winter hunger. In medieval Russia, winter doesn't just bring snow, it brings scarcity. A slow tightening of the belt, a silent accounting of what's left in the root cellar, and a constant calculation. How many mouths versus how many loaves? You do the math and it never adds up. The floorboards creak louder in winter. Maybe because the house is drier. Maybe because you're listening harder. Listening for what's left, for what's not. You check the cellar daily, even though nothing new grows. You open the jars and sacks and crocks again and again, hoping one of them has multiplied overnight. They never do. You head into the woods at dawn, axe in hand, hoping to bring back something. Anything. Not game. You're not that lucky. Just firewood. You'll need it to boil the soup tonight. Soup is a generous word. It's more of a memory. A handful of dried leaves. A scoop of old rye. Maybe a turnip if no one's watching. Maybe. You know what a real meal feels like. You had one once. Years ago, at a feast day. There was stew thick with meat and barley. Honeyed bread. A plum. Just one. You still dream of the way its skin burst between your teeth. You think about that plum like other people think about their first kiss. Sometimes when it gets really bad, you add birch bark. Not the thick stuff. Just the tender white curls, scraped into strips and boiled to mush. Tastes like desperation, but it fills the space. Temporarily. Want a strange tidbit? During severe famines, people in some regions baked bread from ground-up moss and lichen mixed with sawdust. It had the texture of sand and the nutritional value of a whisper. Still, it was considered better than nothing, though it often made people sick, or worse. Your uncle once tried it. His teeth never recovered. His stomach neither. You remember your neighbor, old Yegor. He made it through the famine of '83. He told you once, very quietly over a shared flask, that his family ate boiled leather from a boot. Too much salt, he said with a grin. Then he cried, "Tonight, you ladle out the soup slowly." Everyone gets a share, even the baby, though the broth dribbles down her chin and barely touches her tongue. She sleeps anyway. Sleep is the only escape from this kind of hunger. A deep, slack-jawed sleep that looks too much like surrender. There's a saying passed around like a curse. A full stomach does not remember an empty one, but you will. Always. Because even in good years, the fear never leaves. You store root vegetables like their treasure. You count loaves the way nobles count coins. You scan the horizon not for enemies, but for frost. Historians still debate the severity and frequency of famine in medieval Russia. Some claim it was a rare crisis event, while others argue it was a cyclical visitor, expected every few years like a bad uncle. What they agree on is that when famine struck, it struck hard. Crops failed, animals starved, people moved, or didn't make it. There are whole villages on maps that no longer exist. No one talks about why, but everyone knows why. You've heard of the hunger stones, great rocks along rivers only visible when the water levels drop too low, meaning drought, meaning disaster. Carved into them are warnings. If you see me, weep. You haven't seen one yet, but you believe they're real. The market's empty now. Nothing to buy, nothing to sell. The traders stopped coming when the snow got bad. Or maybe they heard the stories, the ones about villages turning on each other, about stews with no ingredients anyone can name. You don't ask. You don't want to know how close your own neighbors might be to breaking. The local priest prays for rain, or sun, or both. He says hunger is a test of faith, but he also eats better than anyone else. He's fatter in winter than you've ever been in summer. You notice. Everyone does. You watch the children. They play less, sit more. Their games become quiet, slow, strange. One girl counts stones and calls them dumplings. A boy pretends to roast a stick over a fire that doesn't exist. You smile, then look away. It's too much. Because they're not pretending for fun. They're practicing disappointment. You try to distract yourself, fix the roof, mend a sock, sharpen a blade, anything to forget the ache gnawing your ribs like a rat trapped under your skin. But it's always there, pulsing like a second heartbeat, a rhythm of the poor. Sometimes you dream of feasts, banquets, long tables of roasted meat and honey cakes and sweet wine, tables that stretch into eternity. You wake up chewing on nothing. Once, you bit your tongue in your sleep. You swallowed the blood, and for a second, you were grateful. It tasted like something. One night, you hear movement near the livestock pen. You go out, thinking maybe a fox, maybe a thief, but it's just your cousin, kneeling in the dark, whispering to the pig, not in anger, in apology. You don't speak. You just watch him cry into the hay. You both know what comes next, because when it gets bad enough, everything becomes negotiable. Morality thins like the soup. You start doing things you once judged. You stop asking questions you don't want answered. There are rumors of stew pots in distant villages that should never be opened. You pretend you didn't hear them, but still, you survive. Spring will come. It always does. The snow will melt. The rivers will thaw. The earth will soften. But that doesn't mean the hunger will end. It just means you'll walk a little straighter while still carrying it with you. And when the bread finally returns to the table, thick, warm, honest bread, you'll eat slowly, reverently, gratefully, but never without remembering the bark, because you've learned something that only hunger can teach. Food isn't just survival. It's memory. It's dignity. It's peace. And when it's gone, everything else leaves with it, except the ache. That stays. You hear them before you see them? Hooves pounding like thunder across the frozen path, the clink of bridles, the low hum of voices you don't recognize. You step back, out of sight, because when the Boyers arrive, it's best not to be noticed. They don't come often, and they don't come kindly. A Boyer is nobility, not a king, but close enough. They wear fur like armor, silk like skin, and stare down their noses like you're a particularly smelly patch of snow. Their horses are bigger than yours. Their boots are shinier. Their blades, sharpened more often than your teeth. You nod deeply, head down because even eye contact can be dangerous. The Boyer doesn't return the greeting. He doesn't see you. Or he chooses not to. It doesn't matter. You're dirt, and he owns the land you're stuck in, including the patch beneath your feet. Boyers live well, Vast estates, glittering banquets, towers with views so wide, they forget what it's like to have to kneel to cook. Their homes are lined with tapestries, fur pelts, sometimes imported mirrors, if they're wealthy enough. And they're always wealthy enough. You visited one once. Just once. Carried firewood to the back gate. Got a glimpse through an open window. A dining table longer than your whole house. A roast swan on a silver tray. And a servant wiping the wine from a carpet. A carpet. You still think about that sometimes. A fabric so rich they spilled wine on it and wiped it up. Luxury like that feels fictional. Like seeing a dragon. Want a quirky tidbit? Boyars often bathed more regularly than peasants, but not always in water. Sometimes they used finely ground rye flour mixed with scented oils to scrub themselves clean. Powder baths. Your skin itches just imagining it, but don't let the perfumes fool you. These men were brutal. Justice for a boyar was optional. If a servant stole, whipping. If a peasant looked suspicious, jail or worse. If a neighbor insulted them at a feast, duel, poison, exile. Or if they were in a good mood, just a ruined reputation. Their word was law, in their own domains at least. Even the Tsar tread carefully with certain boyars. The balance of power was like dancing on ice. One misstep, and it all cracked wide open. Historians still argue about the boyars' true role in shaping Russian politics. Some claim they were noble parasites, slowing the growth of centralized power. Others say they preserved vital traditions and resisted tyranny. The truth, as always, is layered, and usually hidden behind velvet curtains and silk lies. Back in your village, everyone stiffens when the boyar's cart rolls through. Children are pulled inside, old men straighten up, women avert their eyes, because nothing good comes from a visit. Sometimes he comes to collect dues, and not just in coin. Labor, grain, a pig, a daughter if he's feeling particularly cruel. You've seen it. The quiet bargaining, the held breath, the way people say yes through gritted teeth because no is too expensive. He owns the mill, the roads, the woods, technically, even the river. Fishing without permission? A lash. Cutting trees from his forest? A fine you'll never afford. You're a guest in your own land, and the host's smile has too many teeth. Once long ago, a group of peasants rose up against their boyar. It didn't end well. The tale goes, they burned his barn, his stables, and tried to storm the manor. But the boyar escaped and returned with guards. The punishment? Public, theatrical, and seared into memory. You weren't there, but your grandfather was. He still flinches when he hears horses galloping too fast. You sometimes wonder what makes someone like that. Was he born cruel? Or just taught that power needs sharp edges? You'll never know. You'll never ask. One time you made eye contact, by accident, just a second. He held your gaze, as if amused. You looked away so fast you nearly fell over. But you remember what you saw. Nothing. Just cold calculation, like a butcher choosing which pig to slice next. You dream sometimes of rising higher, of being the one giving orders, sitting by the fire in clothes that don't itch, eating food you didn't have to grow. But then the morning comes and the hunger returns, and the landlord's steward shows up with a new list of quotas. So you bow. Again, and tell yourself, maybe in the next life. You don't want to go, but the whole village is walking in that direction. A slow, shuffling procession, half curious, half fearful, fully resigned. The kind of movement people make when they're headed somewhere sacred or profane. And sometimes in this country, it's the same thing. You already know what it's for. There's only one reason this many people gather in the square when it's cold enough to snap your breath in half. Someone's going to die. Execution Day. You don't know who. Or maybe you do. Maybe it's the man who shouted about the tax collector last week. Maybe it's the woman who was caught burning herbs that smelled a little too sacred. Or the boy who wandered too far west and came back with a new word in his mouth. Or maybe it's someone completely innocent. Doesn't matter. The rope doesn't ask questions. The platform's already set. Wood stacked neatly. Ropes tied. A block, a pole, sometimes a wheel. You don't always know what method you're getting, but you know it won't be quiet. There's a guard, yawning. He's done this before, too many times. His spear leans against the fence like a broom. Children run toward the front. Children. They don't laugh, but they're curious. This is as much entertainment as warning. In a world with no theaters, no books, no escape, a hanging is a kind of grim theater. Morality, acted out in screams. Even the crows get excited. They perch like black punctuation marks on rooftops, waiting. You keep your hood up. You don't want to be remembered as the one who watched too closely, or the one who cried, or the one who didn't clap. Yes. Sometimes they clap. You edge toward the back. People murmur. Not prayers, not really. Just breathy commentary. I heard he cursed the Tsar. No, he stole a sack of flour. They say he talked to a TSAR in the woods. Everyone has a theory. No one has the truth, but truth isn't the currency here. Fear is, and then they bring him out. He looks like anyone else. That's the part that always gets you. They never look evil. They look like neighbors, co-workers, cousins. This one's young, too young. His hands are bound, his mouth gagged, but his eyes move fast, looking for someone. Or maybe for a last glimpse of sky. You wonder what he did. You wonder if it matters. You wonder what you would confess to if a knife hovered long enough at your throat. And you wonder how many of your own thoughts would be punishable if someone wrote them down. The priest says a few words. The executioner doesn't. He just pulls the lever, tightens the rope, swings the axe, depending on the day. Today, it's a noose. Fast, but not kind. His boots are stiff with dried blood. And just like that, it's over. No wailing, no protest, just silence. Until someone coughs and the world starts turning again. The silence isn't respect. It's calculation. Everyone is tallying what not to say, what not to do, who not to trust. Want a strange detail? In some areas, the bodies were left hanging for hours, sometimes days, as a warning. Birds pecked. Wind swung the corpses slowly. Children dared each other to touch the feet. You never did. Not because you were scared, because you were smart, because you understood early that surviving meant knowing what not to touch. Historians still argue whether these punishments served justice or simply maintained control. Were they necessary to keep order in such brutal times? Or were they performative cruelty, power flexed in blood and bone? There are scrolls and sermons on both sides, but here in the square, nobody's writing treatises. They're just watching and waiting. Control isn't enforced through swords. It's enforced through routine. Back home, your hands shake as you light the fire, not from cold, from memory. That face, those eyes, the way the legs kicked once, then stopped. The fact that the executioner didn't even blink. There's a knock at the door, just a neighbor, bringing bread. Maybe he feels guilty. Maybe he feels grateful it wasn't him up there. Maybe he just wants someone to look him in the eye so he remembers he's still a person. You take the bread. Say thank you. close the door, bolt it. Later that night, you lie awake. You can't stop seeing the platform, the rope, the drop, the way the snow soaked up the sound like a sponge. But worse than that, you remember how normal it felt, like brushing your teeth, like checking the weather, like tying your boots. That's the part that keeps you cold even under the blankets. The way horror becomes routine, the way cruelty becomes schedule, the way a death becomes a Wednesday. And somewhere deep down, you know, if the tables turned, if you were on the platform, the crowd would gather just the same, and someone in the back would be thinking the same thing you are now. He looked just like me. It begins with the bell. You're not near the church, but you feel it in your ribs before you hear it in your ears. A slow, heavy clang that rolls over the rooftops like thunder dragging its feet. A sound that belongs to no hour, no feast, no holy day. It doesn't ring for mass. Not this time. It rings for death. The plague has arrived. No one says it outright at first. The village mutters about fever, a strange cough, bad air. You try to believe it's something ordinary. A cold snap, a bad turnip harvest, maybe even witchcraft again. Anything but what it really is. But when the second bell rings, and the widow's child is buried before sunset with no priest and no hymns, denial vanishes like breath in the cold. This isn't fever. This is the Black Death. And it doesn't come with fanfare. No banners, no black smoke, just quiet terror. A boy goes to bed shivering and doesn't wake up. A woman collapses on her way to the well. You carry her bucket back, but not her name. A merchant in the next town dies in the middle of bargaining over eggs. His coins still in his hand. People vanish like smoke. No cries, no farewells, just blankets left folded, doors left ajar. No one knows exactly where it came from. Some say the traders brought it from the south. Others whisper it crept from the earth, summoned by sin or unearthed by cursed soil. The priest blames pride. The herbalist blames mice. A shepherd blames a comet he saw 3 winters ago. Historians still argue whether the plague in medieval Russia was as devastating as in the West. But when it's your village losing people every morning, it doesn't feel like a debate. It feels like a war. You cover your mouth with a scrap of cloth, not because it works, because it's something to do with your hands when you can't help anyone. You burn herbs in the corners of your hut, wormwood, pine needles, dried juniper. You hang garlic. You whisper prayers that no longer comfort you. Want something eerie? In some regions, people wore hollow beads filled with vinegar or crushed flowers, hoping to purify the air. The rich had real pearls. You use a carved bit of birch bark and dried lilac petals tied to a strip of wheel around your neck. It doesn't help, but you feel worse without it. Soon the smell changes. You try not to notice it, but it creeps under your door, into your clothes, your hair. Rot, pus, wool soaked in sweat and never properly dried. The scent of a body no longer human, but not yet corpse. The village healer starts refusing visits. She won't come out anymore. Says her remedies don't work on this. Says this isn't a sickness. It's a reckoning. One day you pass her house and notice the shutters are closed from the inside. They never open again. You never see smoke again either. The church fills with the sick, then empties as the corpses are moved to mass graves. Not because they've run out of piety, because they've run out of space. No funerals, no last rites, just bundles wrapped in linen, lowered by men who no longer flinch, who no longer ask names. There's a cart that makes rounds. You don't look at it. You pretend it's not there. just as it pretends not to stop at your house. At night, you hear moaning through the walls. Not prayers, just moans, long and wet and helpless. Then silence, always silence. The priest begins ringing the bell at every hour, maybe to warn the living, maybe to confuse the dead, maybe just to feel like someone still has rhythm in a world that lost time. The bell lingers in your dreams. Even there it tolls, not as sound, as weight. One morning, you wake and realize you don't remember what day it is. No one does. The sun still rises, but it feels like habit more than blessing. Time melts in crisis. There's only before the bell, and after. You boil everything now. Water, clothes, wooden spoons, the prayer cloth your mother gave you. You don't eat with anyone. You don't speak unless needed. You sleep sitting up, like you're still listening for hoofbeats. You breathe shallow. You cross yourself constantly until your hand moves without thought. You haven't spoken to your neighbor in days. You know she's still alive because the smoke still comes from her chimney. But neither of you wants to risk a word. Words carry breath, and breath carries death. Someone burns a whole house. Bodies still inside. They say it's for mercy. Others say it's fear. No one says it was wrong. You remember a story, told to you as a child, about a village so scared of the plague that they painted crosses on every door, hoping the angel of death would pass over. You carve one now into the lintel above your threshold, deep enough that your hands bleed, deep enough that it stays. Not because you think it will work, because you don't know what else to do, but it doesn't stop the sickness. Historians suggest the plague helped collapse feudal systems in the West. Too many laborers dead, too few to farm. Power shifted, wages rose, peasants gained leverage. But in Russia, the weight pressed harder, landowners clutched tighter. The state stepped in. Serfdom tightened like a noose that never came off. You lie awake, imagining Moscow. Does the bell ring there too? Do they smell the same decay? Or do the boyars hide behind velvet curtains while the rest of you rot in wooden beds? You hear a sob outside. Not loud, not for you, just someone breaking. Softly, privately. A sound so human it hurts to hear. You don't move. Grief is a solitary act now. Even mourning feels contagious. And still the bell tolls. Each hour, each night, each breath you count. And you wonder in some part of your mind that still dares to think beyond survival. When it stops, who will be left to ring it? You see them playing in the mud. 3 children, covered from head to toe in slop, laughing like they don't know how short childhood is. And they don't. Not yet. But you do. You watch them with a strange mixture of warmth and dread. Because in medieval Russia, childhood doesn't last long. It ends not with a birthday, but with a chore. Their laughter is wild and bright, the kind that echoes off wood walls and frozen fences like spring refusing to die. They slap handfuls of mud into strange shapes, a castle maybe, or a bear, or nothing at all. They shout nonsense, invent games. One of them hums a song with no words, and the others follow, like birds learning flight. You smile, and then you remember. By the age of 5, you were already fetching water from the well. Not a game, not a supervised activity, just a bucket, a shiver, and the long walk through a village that didn't really slow down for small legs. The handle cut into your fingers. The water sloshed cold against your knees. The rope left burn lines in your palms. But no one called you brave. They called you useful. At 7, you knew how to milk a goat, patch a tunic, and keep the fire going through the night when the wind howled loud enough to feel like voices. By 10, your back hurt in the mornings. By 12, you could skin a rabbit, haggle over beets at market, and keep your youngest sibling from wandering into the frozen woods where the tracks led in, but never out. Childhood here is more like an audition for adulthood, and no one's ever guaranteed the role. If you were lucky, you might have had a toy, a carved piece of wood shaped like a horse, or a doll made of straw and flax. No faces, remember? Spirits could slip into those. You never forgot that. Even play was cautious. Even joy was hedged. Want a strange detail? Some villages believed that a child's first steps determined their destiny. If they stepped toward the hearth, good fortune. Toward the door, bad omen. Toward the livestock, they'd feed others all their life. Your mother told you, you walked straight into the wall. She never said what that meant. You never asked again. You worked beside your parents, mimicking every motion like a shadow with blisters. You learned to stand quietly, to hold tools longer than your arms, to smile when your stomach growled, because grown-ups didn't like complaints. Your rewards? Bread. Maybe a pat on the head. Maybe. But praise was rare, not because they didn't love you, but because they were tired and afraid and convinced that too much softness made children die faster. School? That was for boys in monasteries. If you were peasant-born, education meant knowing when to sow, when to reap, when to keep your mouth shut, and which mushrooms wouldn't kill you by morning. And if you were a girl, you learned to cook, sew, keep quiet, carry more than your weight without complaining, and clean the blood from linens without flinching. Futures were not chosen. They were inherited, like boots or burdens. Historians still debate whether medieval peasant children were truly robbed of a real childhood or simply lived one appropriate for the times. But most agree, if you were old enough to walk, you were old enough to work. The line between child and adult wasn't a gradual slope. It was a cliff. One day you were playing in the dirt. The next, you were burying someone in it. You remember your friend Danya. He was 7 when his father died. No warning, no speech. One day alive, the next day, a wrapped bundle lowered into frozen soil. Danya stopped playing after that. He started carrying his father's tools, even though they dragged behind him like anchors. No one told him to. He just knew. Illness took children more often than not. A cough, a fever, a scratch that festered. The herbalist would try everything. Teas, poultices, whispered prayers. But sometimes the child simply stopped. The sky just got quiet. The crying stopped, and everyone knew. The grief was private, short, not from coldness, but necessity. There were still mouths to feed, still snow to clear, still animals that needed grain more than people did. And yet, children still laughed. You remember that too. In the dirt, in the snow, in between chores. They chased geese until they screamed like old women, made snowmen with rabbit bones for arms, stole berries, even when told not to, played tag in the rye until they vanished like shadows. And for moments, real golden moments, they forgot the weight of the world. They laughed like their bones didn't hurt, like wolves weren't real, like there was always going to be enough bread. You hear a lullaby in the distance, soft, minor key. A mother singing as she rocks a child wrapped in fur. The words speak of birds and rivers, but the melody feels like a goodbye. You wonder if she's singing the same lullaby your mother once sang. Probably. These songs outlive everyone who sings them. You turn back to the children in the mud. One slips and falls, laughs so hard she can't stand. The others tease her gently. No cruelty yet. That comes later. For now they are still soft, still free, still in the pause before the wait. You want to tell them to enjoy it, to cling to these minutes like they're gold, to play harder, laugh louder, breathe deeper, but you don't. You let them laugh, 'cause they'll find out soon enough. In medieval Russia, no one stays a child for long. Steam rolls out like a ghost, curling through the wooden cracks of the little bathhouse before the door even opens. You step inside, and the heat hits you in a wave. Thick, wet, nearly violent. The kind of heat that feels alive, like it's crawling across your skin and burrowing under your ribs. The cold you've carried in your bones for months vanishes instantly. So does your sense of personal space. Welcome to the banya. This isn't your quiet, solitary soak. This is communal. Hot, humid, loud, naked. Yes, very naked. Men and women usually bathe separately, though in some villages, those lines blur. In some seasons, on certain holy days, or after too much homemade kvass. You don't ask questions. You just pick a bench, try not to stare, and do your best to act like this is completely normal, because it is. The air smells of birch leaves, smoke, mildew, and decades of boiled sweat. The walls drip. The benches hiss. The stones glow faintly red. Not from fire, but from memory. You feel like you've entered the lungs of the village itself. Someone tosses water onto the rocks with a grunt. The hiss that follows is instant, loud, and unforgiving. The temperature spikes so fast it feels like punishment. You're handed a bundle of thin birch branches, a venik. It's not decorative. It's not symbolic. It's practical violence. You soak it, shake it, and then, yes, use it to whip your own back. Or better yet, let someone else do it. There's no modesty here, just tradition and the belief that pain is purifying, that a little sting can sweat out sin. And honestly, it kind of works. Want a strange detail? Some Russians believed the banya was home to a spirit, the bannock, a soot-covered bath dweller who lived behind the stove, small and silent, but never sleeping. If you misbehaved in the steam, swore, mocked, gossiped, or spilled blood, the bannock might scald you, or scratch your back raw, or worse, pull you into the stones, never to be seen again. So you behave, or you pretend to. You're sitting there letting the heat soak into your muscles when a sudden thwack lands on your back. Then another. Then another. Someone's helping you relax. You grunt, not from pain, from release. Each strike is a rhythm. Wood, flesh, sweat. You exhale through clenched teeth. Your skin blooms with red. Your jaw slackens. A man nearby lets out a long sigh. This, he says, is the closest we get to paradise. You nod, not because you agree, but because in this land of mud, frost, hunger, and silence, a few minutes of clean skin and hot air really does feel like heaven. But then, the mood shifts. Two men start arguing. Quietly at first, a joke that wasn't taken as one, then louder. A goat gone missing, a debt unpaid, an insult, or a truth spoken too plainly. One stands, the other doesn't. A third man tries to intervene, but slips on the slick wood. His elbow hits the stove with a sickening thud. It's all happening fast. Then a punch is thrown. You duck just in time. Steam and sweat don't slow fists. And the banya, sacred as it is, doesn't prevent grudges from boiling over. The birch bundles are dropped. The stones are forgotten. All that matters now is heat and motion and years of tension coming to surface. Blood doesn't show up right away in this heat, but the sound of flesh meeting flesh, that's unmistakable. It sounds like wood splitting in a damp forest. The fight is short, brutal. No crowd cheers. No one separates them. Everyone knows the rules. Let it burn itself out. Kolya, the larger man, takes a knee to the ribs. The smaller one bleeds from the lip, eyes unfocused. Someone's tooth rolls across the floor and lands near your foot. It steams. You stare at it a moment too long. The others barely react. One man shrugs, reaches for a ladle of water. Better here than outside, he mutters. Because out there, justice means lashes, stocks, maybe disappearance. In here, you might leave bruised, but you leave alive. Eventually, things calm down. Apologies are mumbled. One man pours water over the loser's head. The birch switches are picked up again. Steam returns. So does the silence. The bannock is probably pleased. Historians still argue whether the Russian banya was more a place of health or ritual. Was it a proto-hospital, a social court, a purification rite, a folk therapy session? The answer is yes, to all of it. Here, secrets are shared, deals are made, enemies are forgiven, or not. And you? You sit quietly, nursing a red welt on your shoulder, and wondering how steam can feel like both salvation and a trap. Outside, the cold waits for you. It waits for all of you. But inside, for a few more minutes, you're clean. Not just dirt-washed clean, but soul-scrubbed, blood-warmed, almost human again. Eventually, you step outside, naked, steaming, like a chimney with legs. Your feet crunch in snow. Someone hands you a cloth. You nod in thanks, wrap it around your waist, and walk barefoot across the frost-bitten earth. It's not cold. Not yet. Your skin still sings. You exhale, long and slow, and for a breathless moment, you think, maybe, just maybe, you can survive this century after all. Then you see the man with the broken tooth limping home in the same direction as you, and you realize, maybe not. You hold the last 3 kopecks in your palm like they're gold coins. They don't shine. They don't clink. They just sit there. Small, dull, heavy in a way that metal shouldn't be. One is bent at the edge, as if it tried to escape and was punished for it. Another is smooth as river rock, passed through too many hands, worn by the calluses of desperation. The third still carries a faint cross stamped into its face, not a symbol of faith anymore, more like a scar. The tax collector arrives tomorrow. You already know the rhythm of it, the same every season. Doesn't matter if you're sick. Doesn't matter if your roof collapsed under snow, or if your daughter's fever hasn't broken in 4 days. The quota is the quota, and you're not just paying for the czar's table. You're feeding the boyar, who hasn't seen a field in 20 years, the steward who sends his dog to collect debts, the priest who blesses the same hand that takes, and the passing soldier who decides your boots would look better on him. You're taxed in coin if you have it, in grain if you don't, in favors if you've got nothing left. They'll take your firewood, your tools, your fence posts, and sometimes, someone. No one speaks it aloud, but silence falls heavy when a girl disappears to serve in a manor, or when a boy is conscripted and never writes again. That silence, it lingers, like a smoke that never clears. And then there's the tithe. The church wants its portion, 1/10 of what you earn, which might be nothing, but never means less. For God, the priest says, smiling as he pockets the eggs you'd set aside for your children's supper. You don't argue. Not with the man who decides whether your soul rots in purgatory. Not with the man who listens at windows and whispers at tables. Want a strange detail? In some villages, it was considered bad luck to pay your tithe with your left hand. The right was for offering. The left was for shame. You once saw a man do it without thinking, and watched the priest slap him so hard the ring drew blood. He apologized. To the ring, you prepare anyway. Not because you think it'll help, but because ritual is a way of pretending you still have choices. You bake a small loaf of rye. You sweep the floor twice. You hide your better spoon beneath the hearth bricks. You scrub the soot from your wife's shawl and braid her hair. Not because you expect kindness, but because presentation is a shield. You dress like you're greeting a wolf, even if he's already tasted your throat. When the collector comes, he's not alone. They never are. Two men flank him, one with a cracked ledger and a thin smile, the other with a cudgel that's been oiled recently. They don't sit. They don't take off their boots. They don't even blink when the dog growls low from under the bench. They ask you questions you already know the answers to. How many animals? How many adults? How much land? He doesn't write down your words, just looks at your house, your hands, your wife's boots. He already knows the truth. He just wants to see if you'll lie. You give him your 3 kopecks. He lifts them with 2 fingers, like they're dirty. Makes a mark in his book that probably doesn't mean anything at all. Then he asks for the bread. You hand it over, hot and wrapped in cloth. Your fingers brush his. His are cold. Then he glances at your wife's necklace, a string of glass beads, not worth a goat's tooth. But he pauses. His eyes linger just long enough for the silence in the room to shift. Your breath catches. You feel it in your throat, in your gut, in the bones of the house. But he moves on. Maybe he's tired. Maybe he's cruel in slower ways. Maybe he'll be back tomorrow when no one's watching. Historians still debate whether Russian taxation under the Tsars was more brutal than in the West. They cite numbers, percentages, legislation. They argue whether serfdom softened or suffocated the soul. But to you, it's not theory. It's not politics. It's a hand. Always on the back of your neck, gentle enough not to break it, firm enough that you never forget it's there. After they leave, your wife doesn't speak. She just starts reboiling the soup. With less water this time, so it feels thicker, you sit on the stoop. Watch the snow melt unevenly in the yard, leaving patches of dirt that look like bruises. You think about the spoon under the floorboards. You think about digging it up, selling it, trading it for kerosene, or boots for the boy, but not today. You visit your neighbor later. He wasn't so lucky. They took his horse, the only one, the one that plowed his field, that carried his daughter to the midwife last spring. He sits by the fire, sharpening a stick too short to be useful. He's not carving anything, just moving. Because stopping would mean crying. You leave before sunset. You don't want to see what happens next. That night, you dream of silver coins falling from the sky, sharp as knives, endless and cold. They don't clatter. They cut. You feel them in your mouth, your eyes, your lungs. You wake up with the taste of metal on your tongue and the pressure of the ledger still in your chest. The taxes are paid, for now. But mercy, that's never included. You hear the clatter before you see him. A strange music of motion, the jingle of small bells, the groan of wooden wheels over frozen earth, the creak of unfamiliar boots pressing patterns into snow. No one here has ever walked. The children hear it first, then the dogs. Then the silence bends, just slightly, like the forest itself leans in to listen. The cart rolls into the village like a dream someone left open. He isn't from here, not even close. His coat is too clean, his posture too straight, his horse too calm for the noise it drags behind it. There are tassels on his gloves, silver buckles on his shoes, a feather in his hat, bright and ridiculous. The children whisper. The women pause in their chores. The old men pretend not to look, but every neck turns just enough. Even the priest pretends to be fixing the bell rope as he leans out his window, eyes narrowed like shutters against a storm. You step closer, not out of boldness, out of something worse. Hope. Maybe he has soap, or a new needle, or the blue thread your wife hasn't seen in 3 years, or something rarer, a story that doesn't end with mud, debt, or silence. But the Boyar steward reaches him first. Of course. A few murmured questions, a glance at the horse's hooves, the subtle tension of paper changing hands. It's not quite hostile, but it's not welcome either. Everyone watches. No one speaks. Want a strange detail? Foreign traders weren't barred from Russia in this era, but they were never ignored. They were watched like candles in a hayloft, useful if contained, catastrophic if loosed. This one is already burning. He dismounts with a theatrical flourish, grinning like a man who's never feared frostbite. His accent is thick, but not clumsy, like a spoon dipped in honey before stirring the soup. Good people, he says. I bring wonders. Wonders. What a word. Out here, a straight plank is a wonder. A year without funeral songs is a miracle. He opens his cart, not with a creak, but with a click, like the door of a place where nothing is broken. Inside, impossible things. Silks in colors you've only ever seen in birds. Spices that sting your nose from 10 paces. Soap so white, it makes your own hands look like bark. And sugar. Real sugar. Snowflakes that don't melt. The people lean in, but not too far. One girl reaches for a spool of thread, then draws her hand back like it's a snake. A boy stares at the tiny bell-shaped glass bottles. Perfume, the trader says. Liquid scent. The idea alone feels decadent. Sinful, even. He speaks of Paris, where the roads are paved with stone. Of Vienna, where music is written on paper and played by men in wigs. Of books, printed fast and sold cheap. Of laws, made by councils, not by crowns. You watch the priest frown. Progress, the traveler says, is not blasphemy. It is light. A few nod. Most do not. Change doesn't feel like light. It feels like fire, and you've seen too many roofs burn. Want a strange tidbit? In some Russian villages, it was believed that a man who came alone from far away was either a saint or a spy. This man smells too good to be either. He offers a taste of sugar on the tip of a knife. No one takes it, except a child. She licks it, gasps, smiles. Her mother smacks her hard enough to leave a mark. The girl doesn't cry. She just stares at the knife, at the sweetness still clinging to it. You understand. You do. You also know what comes next, because it always does. The murmurs turn sharp. A cough in the village is suddenly blamed on foreign winds. The hens stop laying eggs. Someone blames the smell of his cart. A man mutters about witchcraft. Another crosses himself without realizing it. You overhear the priest later, murmuring to the steward, "Too much color disturbs the eye. Too much novelty tempts the weak." That night, the traveler makes camp near the edge of the village. Not welcomed in, not forced out. Somewhere in between. The most dangerous place to be. You watch him from your window. He reads from a book, by firelight, not aloud, to himself. A book for pleasure, as if he has time, as if time belongs to him. You can't stop watching. He hums a tune you don't recognize. It has no rhythm, no beginning, like something you forgot in childhood. You dream of that song, and of silk. Red silk, brighter than blood, softer than breath. The next morning, the cart is gone. No goodbye, no footprints, just absence. But by your door, a parcel, wrapped in waxed cloth. Inside, a bit of salt, a steel needle, a single coin from a country you've never heard of. And a scrap of that impossible red silk, you hide it beneath the floorboards, where the children won't find it, where even your wife won't ask. You don't know why. Maybe because it's beautiful. Maybe because it's dangerous. Maybe both. But you touch it sometimes when the world feels too dark and wonder what else might be possible beyond the edge of the forest. You step off the path and into the forest, and instantly everything changes. The air thickens. The light softens. The silence isn't empty. It's listening. The village fades behind you with every crunch of snow underfoot. Behind you, smoke, chickens, shouting, iron tools clanging. Ahead, a soundless cathedral of trees. Their trunks rise like columns, their branches locked in vaults of frost. Out here, the trees are the tallest walls you've ever seen, and the sky is a rumor above their tangled crowns. The air smells of sap, old bark, and something faintly sour, like decay hiding beneath beauty. This isn't just wilderness. This is the forest, capital F. And in medieval Russia, the forest doesn't care who you are. It gives, it takes, and sometimes it waits. You carry an axe, not a warrior's weapon, just a peasant's iron blade, worn and notched, haft wrapped in raw leather. You don't feel safer with it, just slightly less terrified. You're here to gather wood, maybe snare a rabbit if you're lucky. But mostly, you're here because your family needs something to burn, and you drew the short straw. The snow is deeper than you expected. Powder near the surface, but beneath, crusted ice that snaps loud underfoot. The kind of snap that carries. The branches sag under the weight of it, bowing like monks in prayer. Every few minutes you hear one snap and groan, dropping its burden in a sudden, terrifying thump that makes your heart kick. You remind yourself not to linger beneath the trees too long. Old advice from older mouths. The forest eats what pauses. Want a strange tidbit? In some regions, villagers believed that if a tree creaked too loudly in winter, it was whispering secrets to the forest spirits. Some even left offerings in hollow trunks, bits of bread, coins, or salt to appease whatever might be listening. A friend once told you that his grandmother would scold him for whistling near birches. "Don't wake the pale ones," she said. You never figured out what she meant. You pause at a stump. Something's carved into it. Not letters. Nothing you'd recognize from the church books or the landlord's ledgers. Just strange scratches. A pattern like teeth or claws or fingers that didn't know how to hold a knife. The lines are shallow, chaotic, but there's a rhythm, as if whoever made them did it slowly, thoughtfully. Not a child, not random, something else. You stare a little too long. The wind moves behind you, just a sigh through the branches, but it feels like breath on your neck. You move on, quickly. You cut wood. Each strike echoes differently out here. The sound doesn't ring. It thuds, dull and swallowed. The trees don't answer. They listen. You collect kindling, gnarled twigs soaked in frost. You watch your breath curl up like smoke from a censer. You talk to yourself softly, words without meaning, just sound to fill the air, to drown out the creeping thought that you're not alone. Because in truth, you might not be. There are stories, of course, always stories, passed around fires, muttered across fields, whispered over cribs when the baby won't sleep, about men who wandered too far and came back mute, about children led into the trees by singing voices no one else could hear, about old women who live under roots and ask questions that unravel your mind if you answer wrong. Some say the wind itself lies sometimes, makes you hear your name spoken in a voice you trust. Some say the snow holds memories, And if you walk in someone else's footsteps, you dream their death that night. You don't know what's true, but you know no one jokes in the forest. Historians still debate whether these stories were metaphors, cautionary tales about getting lost, or genuine belief in spirits, demons, and the Leshy, the green-eyed forest guardian said to trick travelers, copy voices, and rearrange paths when displeased. Your grandfather claimed to have seen one once in the spring thaw, near a deer carcass with no tracks around it. He never entered the woods again after that. Wouldn't even burn pine wood in the stove. You find a clearing, not a large one, just a place where the trees seem to step back, like they're avoiding something. The silence here is heavier, not deeper, denser, like the air itself is holding its breath. There's a circle of stones at the center, moss-covered even in this frost. Some are broken, others lean inward as if listening. None seem placed by hand, yet none seem random either. You don't go near it. You've seen a ring like that before, once, near another village. No one went near it then either. A week later, they found a man inside it, naked, frozen, eyes wide open, like he'd seen something no one else ever should. The priest said it was madness. The old midwife said it was payment. No one buried him. They just built a fence around the stones. This one here, it's older. You feel it. The way you feel old bones beneath fresh soil. Something once happened here, and the forest hasn't forgotten. And now it's watching to see if you will. Your breath fogs the air, slower now. Your ears strain for sound, but there is none. No bird call, no stream, not even the creak of the trees. That kind of silence doesn't last long. It means something is near, or waiting. You drop your bundle of wood, your shoulders ache, your feet are soaked, but you don't stop moving. You don't let your back turn fully to the trees, because the moment you forget the rules, the forest remembers you. There's beauty here too, of course, the kind that doesn't comfort, but stuns you into stillness. Icicles like glass daggers hang from bent pine branches, refracting what little light the sun offers. Snow glitters like powdered crystal, where golden shafts break through the trees, fleeting, silent, holy. You see the pattern of a hare's tracks, like calligraphy, across the untouched snow. Hear the faint trickle of a stream, still moving, stubbornly unfrozen, defying winter like a whisper of spring far below. You step carefully. One wrong crunch could send a branch down. Or worse, alert something that doesn't want you here. The forest isn't evil. It's just old. Older than kings. Older than the church. Older than fear even. It has its own memory, its own language. You were simply never taught how to speak it. You find a patch of mushrooms growing near a fallen log. Strange, this deep into frost. But they push through rot like they belong. You kneel, pick one, sniff it. Earthy, slightly bitter. Familiar, maybe. They're the right color, you think. Or maybe not. You hesitate. Your hand lingers. In your village, they say some mushrooms grow where the dead are buried shallow, that the Leshy marks his territory with clusters like this, where no animal will touch them. You wrap them anyway carefully in the fold of your coat, not out of hunger, out of debt, just in case. Then you murmur a prayer, not to God, to the woods. You don't know the words exactly, just syllables you remember from your grandmother's mouth, muttered over herbs and bones. But you say them because silence out here feels like the wrong kind of answer. By the time you turn back, the sun is already slipping. Forest twilight is a trickster. It comes faster than you expect, darker than it should be. Shadows lengthen in ways that don't match the trees. The cold sharpens. The silence shifts. The path looks different. You hesitate. You turn around once, twice. Nothing is where it was. The snow feels unfamiliar underfoot. Your tracks have softened, vanished in places. Panic taps your spine, then presses harder. You force yourself to breathe. Then you see it. A scrap of cloth tied to a branch. Your marker, your salvation, torn from your own sleeve earlier, tied in quiet desperation. You almost laugh. Almost. You follow your trail back, faster now. Every gust of wind feels like footsteps. Every branch that groans above feels too precise. Each sound is sharper, closer, shaped. You don't breathe deeply until you see the smoke from your chimney. Thin, curling, holy, home. But something's changed. You drop the wood, step inside, look around. Everything is where it was. The iron pot, the cot, the tallow candle half burned. Except for the tiny pile of mushrooms sitting on your table. The ones you left behind. Still damp, still whole. No footprints, no breeze, no door left ajar. Just the impossible weight of them, sitting like a question you don't know how to answer. And outside, in the darkness past the tree line, something shifts. Something watches and remembers. You're huddled near the fire when the shouting starts, not the usual village arguing. This is sharper, urgent. You crack the door open and peek out. There's a circle forming in the snow, torches flickering, voices rising like a storm winding itself into motion. Someone's being accused. Again. This time it's Pavel. Quiet, hunched, a man whose only crime until now was overcooking his fish stew. But someone claims they saw him sneaking into the forest with something wrapped in cloth. Others say he was seen speaking to a foreign trader. Someone else insists they caught him muttering near the graveyard. Truth? Lies? Doesn't matter. In medieval Russia, justice often arrives faster than facts. They drag him to the center of the village. No trial, no defense, just voices and ice and a shovel already sticking out of a snowbank. Just in case. The priest steps forward, holding a cross. The boyar's steward watches from a distance, arms folded, silent. He's not here for justice. He's here to make sure whatever happens doesn't interrupt the tax schedule. You know what comes next. And worse, you know it might be you next time. Justice here isn't written on scrolls. It's carved into memory, into scars, into the cold glint of a blade that doesn't ask questions. There are no juries, just moods. Historians still argue whether this kind of mob law was the failure of a weak central state or a necessary community mechanism. Either way, it worked, in the sense that it kept people afraid enough to behave, or at least pretend to. Someone shouts, "He cursed my cow." Another yells, "He speaks to the wind." And Pavel, poor Pavel, just shakes his head, lips moving too fast to understand. Maybe he's praying. Maybe he's begging. Maybe he's confessing to something he never did. Because when everyone wants guilt, silence looks like guilt too. Want a strange detail? Some villagers believed you could prove innocence by plunging your hand into boiling water. If your skin healed quickly, you were pure. If it blistered, you were guilty. Of course, everyone blistered, but it was the hope that mattered, not the logic. They don't boil water tonight. It's too cold. Instead, someone picks up a rope, not to hang him. Not yet. First comes the confession. They slap. They shout. They make him kneel in the snow and explain himself. Not for truth, but for order. For the illusion that this chaos is somehow controlled. You remember a girl named Anya? Same thing a few years back. Someone said her shadow moved wrong. She vanished by morning. Everyone said she went north, but no one ever comes back from north. Eventually, Pavel admits it, or part of it. Says he found something in the woods, an old carving. He took it home. That was it. A trinket, a charm, not a curse, but that's enough. He touched something outside the village's comfort zone. He crossed an invisible line. The priest declares him clean but foolish. The steward nods, bored. Pavel is fined, his tools taken, his firewood confiscated. A warning, not mercy. A message. Tomorrow, someone else might be in that circle, and it might be you. You return home. Lock the door. Bar it. Whisper a prayer. Not the official one, but the old one your grandmother taught you. The one about silence and shadows and keeping your head down. Because in this world, innocence isn't protection. It's camouflage. And even that doesn't always work. You wake to the sound of wind, but it isn't just wind. It's a whisper, a creak, a soft tapping at the edge of the window, like fingers made of frost. It slides across the glass, not sharp, but searching. The kind of night where shadows lean in closer and silence doesn't feel empty. It feels full, like something is holding its breath just outside the door. This is when the old stories breathe, when everything your grandmother said starts to feel like instruction, not nonsense. You sit up slowly. You don't know why. Maybe because the fire just flickered a little too hard, snapping as if bitten. Maybe because the dog whimpered in its sleep and shifted without waking. Maybe because something outside stepped where no one should be walking this late, on snow that should only remember your own boots. In medieval Russia, the night belongs to superstition, and tonight the dark is heavy, not just black, thick, like cloth pulled over the world. You reach for the little charm above your door, a piece of string, 3 knots, a sliver of bone. Not blessed, not official, just something your mother told you to keep nearby. She said it kept the nav away, the restless dead, the ones whose bodies were never buried right, or whose souls refused to stay quiet. And the domovoi, the house spirit, might like it too, if he's in a good mood. If you remembered to leave him crumbs near the stove yesterday. If you didn't insult the floorboards. Your grandmother believed in signs. A dropped spoon meant visitors. A knife falling blade down meant betrayal. An owl hooting after midnight meant death had noticed your door. A sudden shiver meant someone was talking about you. Or worse, dreaming of you. You used to laugh. You don't laugh now. Want a strange detail? Some villagers believed in the chort, a little devil who caused mischief when he was bored. Spoiled milk, tangled thread, burned bread, cracked mirrors. He didn't need a reason, only an opening. They said you could trick him with riddles, or distract him with shiny buttons. There's a reason your sewing box is never empty. There's a reason you whisper to your comb before brushing your hair. There's a reason the bread knife always points inward when set down. You sit in the quiet and listen. Just a creaking roof, a distant rustle, a log settling in the hearth. Your mind fills in the blanks, as it always does, with things older than memory, older than language. Your breath slows to match the wind, or maybe the wind slows to match yours. The priest says there's nothing in the dark but God and His mercy. But the old women say otherwise. They say the forest breathes at night, that it exhales fog and secrets, that the river sings a different tune after sunset. And if you understand the words, you're already lost. That a candle flickering left to right means someone's lying. And if it gutters and dies without a breeze, you shouldn't leave the house for 3 days, or speak your name aloud until sunrise. You believe them more than the priest. because they've seen the dark with both eyes open, and they know its price. Historians still argue whether this web of folklore was just old paganism tangled up in the Orthodox world, or a genuine parallel system of belief. But for you, it's not theory, it's practice. Every charm, every whisper, every ritual handed down like bread recipes or winter coats. Worn thin, patched over, but never thrown away. In the morning, you might not believe any of it. But at night makes a believer of everyone. You remember last winter when Lena's baby wouldn't stop crying. Every night for hours, nothing worked. Then someone told her to put a silver coin under the cradle and burn juniper wood nearby. She did. The next night, silence. Coincidence? Maybe. But the next week, 3 other mothers did the same, and they still light juniper once a month, just in case. You don't ask too many questions when the answers come in peace and sleep. There's a scratching at the door. You freeze. Just the wind. Probably. Maybe a branch, or a fox nosing the lintel. But you don't check. You don't need to. That's the rule. Don't open the door after midnight unless you know the name of what's knocking. You throw a pinch of salt over your shoulder. You whisper a line you barely remember. Part prayer, part ward, part childhood rhyme. You draw a circle on the floor with your toe and sit inside it. Is it silly? Maybe. But you feel better. And that's what superstition is out here. It's not fear. It's armor. It's structure. It's a map for walking blind. It's the little candle you light in the darkness because it might not chase the monsters away. But it makes you brave enough to sleep. You lie back down, pull the blanket to your chin, close your eyes. Tell yourself, one more time, that there's nothing in the dark except wind, and hope the dark agrees. You hear the crowd before you see them. Not screaming, not yet, but chanting in a low building rhythm. It rises from deep in their throats like a fire getting its first breath of air, a heat you feel in your bones before you even understand it. You pause mid-step. The sky is gray, not with clouds, but with weight. You feel it in your chest. Something is happening. Not ceremony, not routine, rebellion, not a war, not yet. Just a spark, a shiver in the air, a sudden defiance in the posture of the men walking toward the town center, in the way their shoulders refuse to hunch, in the set of their jaws, in the pitch of their voices. Tight, raw, controlled like someone clenching a blade in their mouth. Someone is angry, and this time they are not swallowing it down. You join the edge of the gathering, your heart thudding like a second drum under their feet. There are no banners, no saintly icons, no noble slogans, just cracked fists, chapped lips, and the look. That look. The one that says, "We've had enough." The one that spreads like frostbite, silent, but irreversible. It starts with grain. It always starts with grain, and ends with blood if it ends at all. The stores were raided by the Boyer's men last week. To feed the manor, they said. The village was promised compensation, bread, salt, mercy. It never came. Instead, the guards came back, took a cow, then firewood, then silence. And now the snow is falling again, light as breath. Your neighbor's children are coughing through the night. The priest keeps talking about patience and divine order, but no one's in the mood for sermons. He hasn't missed a meal. He doesn't know the sound of a belly curling inward on itself. So the crowd gathers. Historians still debate how common these uprisings really were. Some call them rare flashes of resistance, anomalies. Others insist they were routine, invisible in official chronicles, because no one writes down the fear of the powerful. But you're not here for a debate. You're here because your ribs hurt when you breathe, because your wife cried when she buried the last root vegetable, because you know the snow doesn't care, but maybe a man with a voice does. Someone steps forward. You know him. His name is Kolya. He used to shoe horses. He used to sing when he worked, whistle when he walked. Now he stands in front of the steward's house, shouting words that make your stomach twist. Not because he's wrong, but because he's right. The land is ours. The grain is ours. Our backs built that manor. The crowd responds in waves, cheers, stomps, the kind of rhythm that's not planned, but born. A sound pulled from hunger and prayer and the dirt beneath your feet. And for one impossible moment, you believe change is coming. Then the guards arrive. Not many, just 6. But they wear armor, and you do not. They wear wolf pelts, carry iron, and you carry frostbitten hope, thin and cracking. The leader steps forward and reads a decree from a curled parchment. The ink is red, the seal broken. Something about disobedience, something about order, something about punishment. His voice is calm, detached, as if he's reading a recipe. Kolya doesn't move. Neither does the crowd. You feel a shift behind you. Some step back, others surge forward. And just like that, the crowd becomes 2 things at once, brave and breakable. A rope pulled tight enough to hum. Want a strange detail? In some revolts, villagers would carry icons at the front, not as shields, but as messages. God is with us. And no one wanted to be the first to strike down a saint. No one wanted to risk striking heaven itself. But there's no icon today. Just boots in the snow, cracked fingernails curled into fists, and the sound of someone cocking a crossbow. The standoff lasts less than a minute. One of the younger boys, you don't know his name, throws a rock too fast, too far. It hits a guard's shield with a clunk that echoes like a verdict handed down from stone. The guards respond. Fast, brutal, precise. Kolya goes down first. Not killed. Not yet. Just struck in the leg with the flat of a blade, hard enough to make him fold like thawed ice. Another man is dragged backward by his coat. A woman is knocked to the ground. Her head strikes the step. She doesn't rise right away. The rest, they scatter, including you. You don't mean to. Your legs just move. Instinct, survival. You run until the shouting is behind you, until the houses blur and the birches open around you like ribs, until you're in the woods again, gasping like a man pulled from a river. You don't cry. Not yet. Not until the trees are still again. Not until the silence folds over you like snow on a path no one will follow. Later you hear that Kolya was taken, not killed, sent north. You know what that means. Everyone knows. You return to your hut, light a fire, sit in silence. The rebellion is over, if it ever truly began, if it ever had permission to be real. But something lingers. Not in the air, on the people. A heaviness, a quiet rage, a waiting. Something that doesn't rot, doesn't sleep, just buries itself in the chest like a coal and waits for breath. Because the grain is still gone. The snow is still falling. And this fire won't stay lit forever. You wake up before dawn, not because you want to, but because that's what life demands. There's no rooster, no bell, just your body, trained like a mule to the rhythm of need. Your breath fogs in the cold air as you sit up. The fire's gone out. Again. The coals are cold, buried in ash like forgotten teeth. You rub your hands together, cracked, stiff, knuckles red like old bruises. Reach for kindling and begin the day exactly as you have every day before it, with aching joints and a silence too loud to ignore. But something's different this morning. You feel it. Not in your body, that's always sore, but in the way the world is holding its breath. The way the snow outside sits too still, like it's waiting, like it knows something you don't, like it has already counted the dead and is just waiting for them to notice. You step outside. Everything is gray, not storm gray, not sunrise gray, just quiet. The kind of gray that makes you feel like you've walked into a dream or a memory you weren't meant to enter. The kind of gray that feels holy and wrong at the same time. You don't say anything. No one does. The whole village moves slower today, like they're tired of pretending things are fine, and maybe they are. Your neighbor coughs hard and doesn't stand up after. You wait, pretending not to look, until he does. Eventually, he does, but slower than before. The priest walks by without looking anyone in the eye. His robes are clean, but his mouth is shut. A child you don't know stares at you with the kind of calm that only the truly hungry have. Not desperate, not begging, just resigned. Like she's already doing the math of how long she'll last. You go through the motions, feed the animals, the ones that are left, chop wood, not enough, mend a fence, one that broke months ago and no one has come to fix. Your hands do what they're supposed to, but your mind? It drifts. Not toward hope. That left long ago. Toward something heavier. Because the truth is, you're tired, not just from work, not just from winter, but from the weight of it all, the rules, the silence, the cold that never leaves your bones, the hunger that is never just yours, the grief you've never had the time to feel because survival doesn't give breaks, because if you stop, you lose something. You wonder, not for the first time, if this is what your life will be. Not in years, but in circles. Cold to hunger, to tax, to silence. Repeat. You've watched people break under it. Some scream, some vanish, some sit down one day and never stand up again. And you've watched people become something else entirely. Harder, quieter, shaped by pressure like coal in reverse. Tough, yes, but duller. Unrecognizable. But you're still here. Somehow, want a strange detail? Some believe that if you sat in total darkness and absolute silence for 7 nights straight, you'd begin to hear voices, not from madness, but from the souls of your ancestors. Most didn't make it past night 3. Not because of fear, but because silence, real silence, speaks louder than death. You're not sure if that says more about fear or about grief. You sit by the fire that night, alone. Everyone else is asleep, or pretending to be. You stare into the flames, but instead of flickering warmth, all you see is what's behind you. The years you've lived through, the pain you've worn like a second skin, the people you've buried, and the ones you never got to say goodbye to. The memory of their voices still lives in the house, in the creak of the floor, in the drawer no one opens, in the smell of boiled nettles. You whisper their names, just once, just to hear them in the air again. The syllables are dry in your throat, like smoke through snow. Outside, the wind rises, not a howl, just a sigh. Long and low, like something remembering. Historians still argue about the soul of medieval Russian life, whether it was forged by suffering or whether suffering merely revealed it. But out here, it's not a debate. It's a truth. You've lost things, people, time, parts of yourself you can't quite name. But you've also gained something. You know how to survive, how to move even when you're numb, how to swallow your name if it keeps you breathing, how to keep going when everything around you wants you to stop. And that is a kind of power, a quiet one, a cold one, but yours. You lie down that night, not hopeful, not broken, just still, like the forest, like the land, like a fire waiting for wind. And in that stillness, you feel something that almost feels like peace. So now slowly, gently, you let the world fade. The torches dim. The wolves grow quiet. The wind outside softens into a hush that no longer rattles the shutters, just strokes them, like fingers on old wood. You've walked through a world of frost and fire, of silence and screams, of whispered names and unspoken grief. And you made it. Somehow you made it. You take a deep breath. The air is no longer cold. It's memory now. Just air shaped like what came before. The axe is down. The fields are asleep. The taxes, the tithes, the stories, they're all behind you for now. You hear the echo of that distant bell again, but softer this time. Not warning, not mourning, just ringing because it knows how to. You feel your body settle into the weight of stillness, not as something heavy, but something grounding, something real. You earn this moment, through the cold, through the hunger, through the long nights wrapped in worry and wood smoke. And now finally, you can rest. The saints can watch over the door. The fire can hold the shadows back. The wind can keep its secrets. You're allowed to close your eyes. Let the forest breathe around you. Let the snow fall without fear. Let the past sleep, and you with it. Because tonight, at last, there is nothing left to survive. There is only stillness, only quiet, only sleep. If you've made it all the way to the end, leave a comment and tell me what story you'd like to hear next. I genuinely enjoy seeing and reading every kind word you share. Thank you for watching. Sweet dreams and good night.